The workforce is changing, and frankly, not everyone is comfortable with that change. I'm here today with Neerja Bhatia, who is a cultural transformation consultant and the founder and author of The Art of Resilience.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Well, good to be here.
It's good to have you. I'd like to know a little bit about what behavioral science is and how you apply it to today's workplace.
So behavioral science is a combination of psychology, sociology, anthropology, and now what we call neuroscience. It is understanding the behavior. If you look at an iceberg, behavior is a tip of the iceberg. What's going on underneath it is our values, our thinking, our beliefs, and what's created our worldviews, okay? So I could have a worldview that could help me be successful, but I could also have a worldview that could help me or get me to fail. To understand our behaviors, we must dive deeper. Because if you look at an iceberg, what moves the iceberg? Is it the wind or the currents? So we can't just look at the behaviors alone. We have to understand what's going on underneath to really change. If you want to create a change in your worldview, you have to understand it first.
Ah, okay. That makes a lot of sense. And once we have that understanding, how can we employ behavioral science to grow leadership within an organization?
Great question. So if you look at leadership, we want our leaders today, especially in this disruption, if you really want them to rise from the ashes of disruption, we want them to be agile, resilient. We want them to be courageous, fearless. And if you look at the brain science, our brain is constantly scanning the environment for whether it is threat or opportunity. Okay. And if the leaders are viewing something as threat when it isn't, when it is truly an opportunity, we need to fix our thinking. We need to grow our thinking, expand it in a way that we will be able to embrace the future and guide the people along. So if you look at leadership, very much to Ray Dalio, I hope I'm pronouncing his last name right. He is the founder of Bridgewater and Associates.
Okay, yes.
And he wrote a book, and he's had a talk on TED Talk, which he talks about how we need radical. I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the name.
Okay.
It's
radical transparency.
Transparency. Thank you. I was thinking transformation.
Certainly.
But radical transparency. We need to be open. We need to really face our fears and gain feedback from everybody around us. So we want to prepare our leaders to really think outside the box and know when they're not right, to expand their worldview and shift and change according to the environment.
And that's an interesting point. If I'm an in the trenches kind of worker, and I want to share a little radical transparency with leadership, how can I do that in a way that's less intimidating? Because I know a lot of people clam up. In a regular conversation with leadership, they certainly are frightened to come to them with news that they think they may not want to hear.
Yeah, that's so. When we are looking at being so open and transparent, the very first thing that we need to look at is psychological safety. Remember, the brain will shrink when it looks at threat. So how do we create that psychological safety? So if, let's say, you're going to go out as a leader, you need to create that for yourself. You need to understand, not just look at the short-term pain, but the long-term gain. Okay. If you really want to win the trust of everyone, it's not that bad of a thing to admit that you went wrong about something, and gaining their feedback to help them. Even the way the leaders are going to lead, everyone's going to follow in that term. You can be the mirror for them.
Certainly.
If you want to create that value of open feedback and radical transparency, what we're inviting leaders to do is really spend time in self-awareness, getting to know, like to die in self, be true, really to get to know yourself, know your idiosyncrasies, know what triggers go off for you, what buttons get pushed for you, and to make those changes, because it's a moment-to-moment conscious choices that is going to make us be great leaders.
And if I wanted to implement that kind of thinking and action on my team, how would I go about doing that?
So there are a lot of psychometric analysis tools out there that you can look at, from Myers-Briggs, DISC, Tilt 365. There's a bunch of them out there. You can also, so for individually, you need to look at those psychometric analysis, and it'll help you understand your blind spots.
Okay.
So it's very important for us to understand what's holding us back, what's limiting us. It's the limiting beliefs we want to, they're like weeds. They won't help us grow and evolve. So we want to pull those weeds out, and these assessments, they're just a starting point. They're not an ending point. And don't look at any assessment that'll pigeonhole you into one corner, because we are brilliant beings. We are more than just a D or an I, we can be all of them, but if we create that conscious practice. And Bruce Lee used to live by this quote, and that is that under dire circumstances, we don't rise to the occasion, we fall to the level of our practice. So once we find out our blind spots, we need to figure out what are those practices that'll help us move, that'll help us grow, that'll help us get to that place of that fearless zone, be confident to do the extraordinary and rise from the ashes of disruption.
Wonderful. And then finally, do you have any advice for getting people into a mindset where they're less concerned with disruption, where they learn to go with the flow, maybe take advantage of the opportunities that it provides?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I can share is keep negating your assumptions. Continue to negate your assumptions over and over again. At one time, we thought the earth was flat, and which is so not true. Some people may still think so, but it's not true. So how can we negate our assumptions? Question your assumptions. Keep questioning, and always be willing to adapt a new worldview. So make your team an ecosystem. You can't do it alone anymore. We are in a very sophisticated, dynamic world now. How do we move from IQ and EQ to CQ, which is more like collaborative intelligence? That would be my advice.
Wonderful. Neerja, thank you so much. That was very interesting. Really appreciate your joining us today.
Thank you.
And thank all of you for joining us. We hope you'll join us again soon for our next segment in the Human Intelligence series.